Welcome everybody to the Koch University Center for Asian Studies webinar. This is the second webinar for the spring 2021 semester. And today we have Dr. Erdal Küçükyalçın from Boğaziçi University. And let me introduce him first. So Dr. Küçükyalçın has completed his Ph.D. at Boğaziçi University, Department of History in the field of Japanese history. At present, he's giving lectures at the Asian Studies Center at Boğaziçi on various subjects, including Asian history, Japanese history, and Japanese management techniques and know-how, art of war and strategic leadership, and Japanese translation. He's also the founder of Musashi Dojo, School of Creative Leadership at Japanese Art Center, where he teaches shodo, which is Japanese calligraphy, in combination with Bushido, the way of samurai. Dr. Küçükyalçın is the editor-in-chief of Global Perspectives on Japan, a yearly academic journal in English, and also the author of the following books in Turkish: Miyamoto Musashi and the Book of Five Rings on Art of War and Leadership, very recently published in 2021. The Samurai in 2019. The Book of Five Rings, Art of War and Strategic Leadership in 2017. The Age of Samurai, Milestones of Japanese History in 2013. Count Otani Kozui and Turkey in 2010, The Heart of the Crane, Janissary Brotherhood and the Order of Bektashism in 2010, and also a historical novel called The Seven Towers, Why Was Sultan Osman the Young was Killed in 2013. So as you can see, he is a very prolific writer. He's also will be newly affiliated to our Koch University Center for Asian Studies as a visiting scholar. So we are very happy to have him. And today's lecture, which will be the first part of a two-part lecture, which will continue on next week. And the first part will be on the evolution of samurai class in Japanese history. So with that, Erdal Sensei, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Aiko Sensei. It's my pleasure and my privilege to be here. And I'm very happy to be working together with you in University. And well, this is a kind of a start for the whole cooperation. So today's topic is, as you have mentioned, is the evolution of the samurai class in Japanese history. Well, of course, it's a long history and we cannot go into the details. So I'd like the listeners to, regard this webinar as an introduction, as a general introduction to the topic. So, well, I don't know. I mean, of course, it's much better to be talking face to face, and I can see your reactions. But I'd like to, I'd like you to ask yourselves, what do you know about Japan? I mean, many people feel like they are familiar to Japan, and they have some sort of knowledge about Japan, but generally it's superficial. I mean, many people know about the word samurai. They know ninja. They know sakura, Fuji-san, etc. But if we go a step further, we find much less. So first thing first. I'd like to mention that the samurai class, the warrior class, as in many other countries, but also and especially Japan, was functional in the establishment of, let's say, central state in Japanese history. But when we talk about history, I mean, we have to go back, of course, in time to almost to the 6th and 7th centuries. When we talk about, when we want to understand Japan, we have to, underline the 7th century, because things started to change in Japan. Before the 7th century, we had, let's say, many clans, but one clan was primus inter pares, and that was the Yamato clan, but there are others. But we cannot talk about a central state then. When Buddhism entered into Japan, well, Japanese history started changing drastically, because the concept of a central state came together with, almost together with, introduction of writing and, let's say, the Ritsuryo laws and system. The laws were imported from the Tang China, and well, they started to be implemented soon. I wrote a book called, well, it's in Turkish, but in English it is called The Age of the Samurai. I started the book with an assassination. Actually, I tried to gather together the milestones of Japanese history, and the first thing that drew my mind and my attention was the assassination, which is called the Ishii event, Ishii incident. What happened then is significant, because we see the clash of the clans and the new formation of a state there. At the start, when the Ritsuryo lords entered into Japan, or before that, there was Yamato clan, and as I said, the primus inter pares, but there were two other significant large clans. One of them was the Nakatomi, and the other one was the Mononobe. So the Nakatomi clan was responsible from the rituals, the Shintoist rituals in the society, while the Mononobe was responsible, or was leading the military affairs. So there were two, main topics that we can realize when we talk about that period. One of them is religion, the other is military. But the laws, when they came to Japan, there was a third clan coming on the stage. There is the Soga clan. This is important because a third clan, well, a fourth clan if you include the Yamato, suddenly enters into the historical stage, and then after a while they will just vanish, and the assassination of the incident of Ishii's, which happened in 1645, was critical. Before that, there was an important personality. You have to underline his name. He's called Prince Shotoku. I mean, he's an important figure, an important character, who started the process of, let's say, building a state in Japan. Prince Shotoku, if you like, you may note it and look into the details of his life. But he's from the Soga clan, and the Soga clan was clever enough to assume the leadership, or the, let's say, the protectorship of the new religion, that is Buddhism. Please don't forget, religion, or the religious institutions, or institutional religion, has the power to organize. I mean, I like this idea, because when you look into the depths of history, you see it obviously. religion has the power to organize, especially the institutional religion. I mean, for example, Shintoism is the native religion of Japan, but we cannot talk about a hierarchical organization of monks and monasteries and etc. It is more animistic, it's more shamanistic, it is, more, let's say, um, uh, it is freer in that sense. It doesn't have a hierarchy. But Buddhism did have, because Buddhism had evolved when it passed through, well, it started, as you know, in northern India, but it passed through Central Asia, and then it went into China, and for hundreds and hundreds of years, it just evolved and developed, and included different local cults, and came to Korea, and from Korea, it went into Japan. So it was already an established religion when it was introduced into Japan from Korea. So, but when Buddhism enters, it needs a protector. And Soga clan was the answer. Because Mononobe, as I said, as I mentioned earlier, Mononobe was, had taken the field, the area of military affairs, while the Nakatomi had taken the affairs of religion. And there appears this risk, in a way, if you're talking about their views. So soon we see a competition, a resistance, a kind of, brewing tension between these clans. And after a while, following the assassination incident of 645, in which the Soga was crushed by the Nakatomi, the clan. But also, we must, know that the rise of Buddhism in Japan did not stop. It didn't even halt. It got stronger and stronger and received more protectorship from other clans and people. Well, we may come back to it, but at this point, we have to know that the idea of a central state appeared for the first time during the mid-7th century in Japan. So, the Ritsuryo system brought a special privilege to the leader of the Yamato clan, who was going to be accepted as the leader of the whole country. What I mean by that is that he was given, the emperor was given the privilege to distribute land to his people. Until then, during the period that he was the primus inter pares, he could have given the clan names, the privilege of using clan names to certain families, but that was all his privilege. The privilege of having the right to give land to the members of each and every clan gave a separate power to the emperor, well, who was going to be called the emperor from then on in that sense. So every citizen, took some portion of land to cultivate. Land is important because, as you know, before, well, in the ancient time and in the Middle Ages, until the modern times, the land was the main source of wealth. And the ability, the power to give land to somebody gives the person the power to dominate the society. And then there comes, for the first time, an attempt to establish something like a government. And in that government too, we see the emperor on top of the whole system, but below him, there comes a position which we can call as a chamberlain or a prime minister, something like that, a dajokan. And then we have the minister of the right, minister of the left, and each have their own fields of responsibility. That is finance, military affairs, internal affairs, ritual affairs, palace affairs, etc., or public services. I mean, this is a structure that was established during this period. So it is something like a government. And after a while comes the 17th, let's say, 17 article constitution, which is important because thousands of years later, Japan, during the Meiji Revolution, or Reformation or Restoration, whichever you want to call it, when Japan opened itself to the world and started modernizing itself, the elites of the new government were, had to find the way to introduce themselves to the Westerners as a country which has tradition like the Westerners, and different, in a way, different from other Asian communities and nations. And in that conjunction, they found really in a way, in the Hobsbawmian fashion, they invented tradition, I could say. They went back in their history and they found out this text, the 17th article constitution, they call it, as the founding text of the Japanese state. The text itself is a text of Buddhist and Confucian ethics, but it gives some outline, some framework for the, let's say, newly born statesmen. And also during that period, we see, let's say, this article was proclaimed in 604. And a year before that, we see in 603, we see a system of ranks and caps, court ranks, etc. So you see the establishment of a concrete state mechanism. And in that, military affairs was an important part when our topic is concerned, because we're looking for the roots of the warrior class. We have to look back, and emphasize that era, 7th century to 8th century. And in the 8th century, well, this was the Nara period, let's say. Nara, even now, is a marvelous, touristical city, a little city, but there are many Buddhist temples, large temples, vast ones like Horyuji, an important center of Buddhism, but early Buddhism, I should say, when Japan is concerned. Well, as I said, religion has the power to organize, okay? So the state is forming too. The emperor is not an primus inter pares anymore. He is the ruler of the country in the, in all its meanings. He has the control over his people. He has control over land, so economy. He has also power to control the military. During that period, see all the Japanese people were turned into citizens in the sense we understand it now, because they were required to do corvée labor or serve in the army for 3 years for each man in return for the land that they received. But at the moment this system started, in a way, it also started to decompose itself, because the temples, the Buddhist temples, could manage to take the privilege of tax and exemption from the state. Not only the Buddhist temples, but also some leading families, some nobles and aristocrats, they also received that privilege. But imagine, there were, let's say, the farmers, basically, they had to work on their land and give their a large portion of their production, harvest, as tax to the central government. They even had to carry that amount of tax that they give to the central state, carry to the capital. They give their sons to work as in corvée labor or as a soldier in the army. I mean, the farmers had hard times. So gradually we see, and in order to evade taxes and responsibility, the farmers, the villagers, started giving up their privileges and their land, donating them to temples or nobles in return for tax exemption. This process gradually, causes mass portions of land to be gathered, collected in the hands of the Buddhist temples. So the Buddhist temples, they become stronger and stronger and stronger. And in order to protect themselves and their interests, they started even having soldiers, little guards, units, little armies. That's something we have to keep in mind, because they're going to clash with the samurai class after a while. So the Buddhist temples were so strong that they were forcing, they were requiring, demanding the emperors to participate in endless rituals. So the emperors were, they got, I'm sure they got sick and tired of being involved in all kinds of rituals. They were, I don't know if they were devout or what, but they were believers of Buddhism. They were, protecting the, it's not new anymore, but Buddhism. So they're building many, let's say, temples, but they were getting tired. So we see Emperor Kammu, an important emperor, who decided that the center of state should be shifted from Nara. In my view, he was escaping from the authority, from the interference, the power of religious institutions in Nara, to another city. This city was also modeled after the Tang capital in China, and he decided to build it as a large complex. And I mean, well, it is nowadays it's called Kyoto. And in his time, the city was called Heian, city of peace and tranquility. I think religion or the interference of religion was important because we see that Emperor Kammu sent some monks to China to bring new doctrines, new teachings of Buddhism as an alternative to the establishment. So we see the establishment of two new sects in that sense. One of them is called Shingon, esoteric Buddhism, and the other is called Tendai from Tiantai in China. And they were located, they were headquartered. One of them, Tiantai, just nearby Kyoto, the new capital. That's the Mount Hiei. And the other one, the esoteric Buddhism, established itself down south in the mountainous areas down south. So it was a bit far away from the center. So that was not a big problem. But the other one, Tendai, as I mentioned, as it was established on a mountain nearby the capital, would become a problem for the state for a long while after it's established. So the Heian period, so let's say the development of an affluent, rich palace life. That's why we see the development of, let's say, fashion. We see development of literature. Aristocracy was enjoying the wealthy life. Many new temples were built, new palaces, etc., residences. That's because the taxes were flowing to the center. But, well, what would happen when a problem arises? Because the emperor did not have, let's say, a large unit of guards around him. Normally, we expect that from kings, from emperors, I mean, throughout the whole world, in all ages. We see, when we see a, let's say, concentration of power at the center, we see that the rulers always built a circle of guards around them in order to use whenever it is necessary, not only for foreign enemies, but also for their own subordinates. It's a tool, it's a weapon. Like the Ottomans, for example, they had their Janissary guards, the Janissary unit, in order to, let's say, suppress whenever it was necessary his own subordinate class. But we don't see that, interestingly, in Japan. I see a few attempts. One of them is called the Tonri Guard, which was established around this era. And the sons of the aristocrats and nobles were taking or conscripted, let's say, were taking into this group, this elite unit of guard, when they were in around 21 years old. But this did not develop that much. And later on, we see a police force too. It is called the kebishi, the inspectors. And the kebishi would become useless, after a while, because some centrifugal forces always were at play in Japanese history. When the center was that rich, the emperor had trouble to control his own sons, his own relatives, princes, many princes and princesses, and their sons and their sons and their relatives. So the numbers were increasing. What they decided to do is to send some nobles, some families away from the center, and generally they sent them to the north, because in the north there was another, let's say, ethnic group. It was called the Emishi. For a long while, until the Yamato clan started to dominate the whole archipelago, they were at good terms with the Emishi in the north. The Emishi were selling fish or, fur, you name it, different products to the Yamato, and they were having, trade. But after a while, the central state, the government, had higher ambitions. The government in Kyoto decided to invade the north. So that's war. We see a gradual change in the Emishi territories during the 8th and 9th centuries. They always go up, north to north. So the emperor sent some of his family members to the north. One of them became the Minamoto clan. The other one became the Taira clan. They were all, noble in origin. But the thing is, they had to be vigilant. They had to be energetic, because they were living on the borders of their own territories. And they had to, at times they were doing trade with the Emishi, but at times they had to fight with them. So they always kept their arms and armor at hand. While the center, the Heian people were, having good time with the income of land. So the Minamoto and the Taira, when some disturbance happened in the capital, they were summoned by the emperor to the city, and they came and helped and suppressed the incident, and they stayed there. This pattern is important because the warrior clans, when they were summoned by the emperor, they come in the in the, let's say, pretense in a way to be helping the emperor, but they're after their own interests. They want more privileges, more political, let's say, advantages, or some more land even. So the Toneri guards of the emperor and the Kebichi police force became useless, because the newcomers, warriors in all senses, already battle-hardened warriors from the north, clan warriors, they came and the Kebishi were used. So, in this period, we see the initial models of warrior idols. For example, one of them is called Yamato Takeru, and the other one who would become, who is identified with the word shogun, Sakanoue no Kamuramaro. Well, there are other names also, but Sakanoue is an important figure because he was famous to be able to subjugate the northern territories. And his image on his horse with his sword and all weapons became a kind of model for the warriors for a long while. So the Minamoto and the Taira, when they were so powerful, now they turned against each other. We see the start of a domestic war between these two clans, and they clashed hard. In Japanese history, it's called the Genpei War. Gen stands for the Minamoto, and Pei stands for the Taira clan. They were fighting for military and political and economical domination of the country. As you can understand, as you may have realized, I'm talking less about the emperor now, because the emperor is gradually becoming a symbolic figurehead, responsible only for the Shintoistic rituals and Buddhist to a certain extent. He is, in a way, his powers, his political, economical, his military powers were transferred to the clan leaders. This would continue throughout almost all Japanese history, with only a few exceptions in the 14th century. Interesting period there. But you see, at the end, the Minamoto clan, led by Minamoto Yoritomo, wins the whole war and establishes the first shogunate, or if you may call it the Bakufu, the 10th government, some call it, but it's a shogunate. Shogun, by the way, means marshal, the general commander of armies, etc. But the full form of shogun was Sei Tai Shogun. If you look at the kanjis, you will understand that the title shogun meant the general who subjugated the northern barbarians, which were obviously the emishi. So Minamoto Yoritomo received the title of shogun and established his own headquarters, which was his own headquarters during the whole Genpei War, anyway, to the north, closer to the emishi territories. That is Kamakura. Kamakura is a town which is nearby Tokyo today. And if you go there, you will see the Tsurugaoka Hachiman temple. That is the Hill of Cranes, Cranes Hill Hachiman temple. Hachiman, I mentioned the name Hachiman because it's an important concept or an important god in Japanese history. It was more associated with the warrior clans, but especially with Minamoto clan. That's why instead of getting in good contact with the Buddhist establishment now in Kyoto, in Heian, in addition to Nara Buddhism, now Tendai was the powerful sect in Kyoto. Minamoto Yoritomo, pulls back to the north to these headquarters and establishes a kind of de facto capital there. And his main temple is Hachiman. Who is Hachiman? Hachiman is the god of, Shintoist god of war and, let's say, wind. Please remember this because it will be meaningful after a while. Hachiman, the god of wind and war. By the way, Buddhism is an interesting religion because it has the habit of devouring local cults, devouring literally in a way. Buddhism, when it goes to a certain place and it is introduced there, Buddhism has the habit of including, it's an inclusive religion, including the local cults, because they don't reject. I mean, they don't say, well, this local cult is wrong, you have to leave it, and etc. The monks say, they preach that the local cults are as important as the ancient, already existing, let's say, gods and angels and, all that pantheon of Buddhism. Now, these local cults also take their own places in the large pantheon of Buddhism. That's what they did in Japan too. They started including the local gods into Buddhism. So we see Hachiman to be revered as a Buddhist cult. But in, let's say, in the 12th century, when the shogunate was established, Minamoto Yoritomo seems to be, aware of certain things. So he establishes, he emphasizes, he puts forward the cult of Hachiman. Also, we see the rise of Zen. I mean, whenever I talk with people who are interested in Japan, they talk about, they like to talk about the importance of Zen in Japan, which I cannot, nobody can undermine the importance of Zen, of course, in warrior life especially, but it is a sect among other sects. If you want to talk about the largest sect, the most influential sect in Japan, if you want to understand Buddhism in Japan, we have to look into Jodo Shinshu, for example, Buddhism, because it has the largest numbers of followers. Jodo Shinshu is split into two, for example, Eastern and the Western. The head temples are in Kyoto, just in front of the train station there. But anyhow, the Eastern side has 8 million followers even now, while the Western side is more than 10 million followers today. So it's almost 20 million people and followers, tens of thousands of temples all around the country. Zen does not have that numbers. There are others. What I mean is there are other sects than Zen in order to understand Buddhism in Japan. It's an interesting topic. It's a rich topic to work on. Anyhow, Zen started rising with the rise of the warrior class. We see with the establishment of shogunate in Kamakura, we see the rise of the warrior class now. Zen was interesting for the shoguns, the warrior class, because it was not interested in politics. It didn't, the Zen monks did not look after their own interests. They don't want to accumulate. They were teaching, their teaching is based on giving and not, taking and accumulating and, so they also needed, the shoguns needed Buddhist monks because they needed writing. The samurai did not know how to write and read. The monks, Buddhist monks were, it was the specialty of the Buddhist monks. And they didn't want to work together with the established Buddhist temples. So they welcomed the Zen Buddhists. We see the rise of Zen during Kamakura. But the point is, the main point especially when our topic is concerned, is that the shogun now became the de facto ruler of the country, officially, because the shogun started forming and announcing laws. And he was also responsible for law and order, the courts. Also, most importantly, he received in practice the power to distribute land to people, even to the emperor and his family. This means that there became two centers in the country, and this was going to continue throughout all Japanese history until modern times. There was Heian, the symbolic capital, and there was Kamakura, the de facto capital. Well, things get quite complex at this point. We realize that because in 1274 and in 1281, at the end of the 13th century, the Mongolian armies, the Mongol invasion attempts, they come to Japan, and well, this was going to cause the Kamakura shogunate to collapse. But anyhow, before doing that, Kubilai Khan, the ruler of the Mongols in China, sent many embassy missions to Japan. Of course, the Kubilai Khan was accustomed, he used to receive answers from the local rulers. But it was not possible to receive answers from Japan, because the ambassadors were perplexed. When they went to Kyoto to meet with the emperor would not, accept them, because the emperor was not the emperor. There was a de facto emperor, because at that moment, the emperors in Kyoto were also sick and tired of getting into Buddhist rituals every day. So they had declared themselves as cloistered emperors, we call it in English. They were living, they were living in monasteries, and they were leaving the emperorship officially, nominally, to their sons. Generally, they were little children. So the official head seemed to be the little child, while the real emperor was behind the scenes, doing all the work in a monastery. So we see two emperors. But at the same time, they didn't have the real power. So the officials were saying to the ambassadors to go to Kamakura, because Shogun was responsible for such important topics. They went to Kamakura, but they had to wait for months sometimes to be received by somebody in charge. But anyhow, in Kamakura, there was also the same situation, because the shogun, after the charismatic Minamoto Yoritomo, there was a, let's say, they were symbolic shoguns, and there were cloistered shoguns who were, ruling behind the scenes. So that's interesting. There were four heads of state. It was not possible for them to give a direct answer to Kubilai. Finally, Kubilai sent a large army in 1274 to the Kyushu island. But interestingly, the army, they ran around for a while, and in 2 weeks they went back. Obviously, they were, gathering intelligence. about preparing for a larger attempt to invade Japan. The Japanese government made all the preparations, and they had to wait for a while because the Mongolian army appeared on the shores of Japan in June 1281 with more than 4,500 ships and more than 100,000 soldiers. It was a big attempt, let me tell you. But after a short while of clashes, suddenly a typhoon appeared and it crashed the whole armada, almost all the ships that brought the Mongolian, Korean, Kublai Khan soldiers anyway. Most of them were killed during that storm, and ships sank. That storm was called kamikaze. I'm sure some of you have heard the name kamikaze. I mean, it's the wrong pronunciation, but it's popular anyway. Kamikaze or kamikaze. It's kamikaze. But I see that generally this word is translated into English in a way wrongly because they translate it as the wind of gods. So it's plural, wind of gods. Normally it should be translated wind of God. And which god is it? It is Hachiman, as you may remember. Hachiman is the god of war. I looked at the resources. I saw some interesting pieces of reports on witnesses and their, let's say, official applications to the Kamakura shogunate, because most of the samurais, although they had fought well, and even they had been wounded during that invasion attempt, they couldn't get any rewards of their services, which would bring the end of the Kamakura shogunate. Because, as I said, land is the basis of income, wealth, but if you invade some place, you can, redistribute land among your warriors. But as for Japan, they were defending. So there is no new land, and the Mongolian army, they just perished. They didn't bring any wealth with them because they were going to take the wealth from Japan. By the way, I wrote a article on this. My view is that Kublai Khan was so interested in Japan because he was desperately in need of copper capacity of Japan. In those times, the Song dynasty was using coins, Song coins, and it was like euro of today in the Eurozone. The Song coins were used around the Sea of Japan. I mean, in Japan too, in Korea, in China, in all kinds of other places. So it was the main currency, but it needed copper. And the copper mines generally depleted during the war. So when Kublai went from north to south, he found out that he had to find a way to procure copper, because normally the Japanese were selling them the raw material to Song China, and they were benefiting from that trade, and they were using Song coin themselves. But it was not the same with Kublai, so he desperately needed copper. I believe he was coming for copper and gold, the raw materials in Japan. So if you look into it, there are some underwater archaeological excavations. There are reports. I read some of them. The archaeologists say that the ships, most of the ships were, cargo ships. They were preparing to, fill them up if they were successful. Anyhow, that they brought nothing. So the samurai did not receive any rewards from their efforts. So the resentment against Kamakura shogunate just went up, and tensions would cause the collapse of the Kamakura, the first shogunate in Japan. So about Hachiman, there are some petition letters to the shogunate telling this situation, and the samurai, the warrior, wanting retribution for his efforts, and also thanking to Hachiman. Also, the shogunate sent some letters to the Hachiman temples to thank for the gods' assistance by causing that storm and repelling the enemies from the Japanese land. So, okay, well, the first shogunate, when it ended, at this stage, you can, if we rethink about the things we have told, gradually the emperor is becoming a symbolic figurehead in Kyoto. Kamakura is the nominal de facto ruler. Shoguns were living there, but the shogunate would collapse after a while. We don't talk about the emperor's, political power. There was this exception in Japanese history. The emperor is called Godaigo, and for a little while, dear friends, for about 3 years, only 3 years, from 1333 to 1336, he was able to announce the unity of right and rule, the unity of the two powers of government, because he said he would have the power to distribute land among his people. He should direct the armies as a real emperor. But it was not that, well, let's say it was not that good for the shogun, which were called the Ashikaga. I mean, I'm just abbreviating some of them. Ashikaga shoguns did not like it. They didn't want to give the privileges of the shogun back to the emperor. So after a while, after this 3-year period, he was banished. Godaigo emperor was banished to the south, to the Yoshino area, in where Shingon, if you remember, I talked about two main sects of Buddhism which entered during the start of Heian era. The second one, the Shingon, was down in Yoshino area, so he escaped there. During the next about 60 years, we see a split between the northern and southern courts. After a short clash between the two sides, we see a split. That's interesting because when Japan started modernizing again, don't forget, Meiji government calls this, let's say, era as Meiji restoration. You know why they call it restoration? Why it is restored? What is restored? The power is restored from the shoguns to the emperor back. It is restored. That's why they like to call it restoration. I mean, if you want to call Meiji revolution, you wouldn't be that sympathized. I mean, nobody wants to hear that. It is an established concept now. It's a term, Meiji restoration. Why is it a restoration? It was a revolution, obviously. It is because power was restored to the emperor. And the model was Godaigo. That's why the Meiji government turns back in history and redesigns the let's say imperial line and rejects the northern line and accepts the southern line. That's interesting. Godaigo attempted this not only because he wanted to be powerful, because during his childhood he was influenced by a certain man, a thinker, a general, a bureaucrat. He's called Kitabatake Chikafu. I think this man is critical in Japanese history. Kitabatake Chikafu. I don't know if I will be able to write from chat. I want people to be more interested in this name because he's not given the importance he deserves. He writes a book about imperial family and the descendants line. He says, basing his arguments on the earliest Japanese chronicles called Nihon Shoki and Kojiki and other sources too, but his theory is simple and understandable, and it is strong. He says the Japanese emperors deserve a special place in world history because they are descendants of gods. And the Japanese imperial line is an uncut, continuous line starting from the sun goddess Amaterasu. That's why the emperor, the Tenno, has all the right to rule his country, his land, both religiously and politically, also, just include economically and militarily. That's his right from birth, he says. So, obviously, in the palace, he influenced, his views influenced Godaigo. He was encouraged, and he found that courage, and he made that move. But it doesn't reflect the situation in Japan. Now, the warrior class was dominating the country and was not that willing to share its power. Samurai, the word itself comes from a word saburao or samurao in Japanese, and it means to serve. And within the kanji, the character itself, you find two parts. One of them is person, man. The other part is temple. So originally, the word seems to come from a person who serves in temples, maybe ancient times. But it was a kanji that was used for the servants. Theoretically, the shoguns and all the warriors that were subordinate to the shogun, all the samurai, were serving whom? The emperor. For what? For protecting the country against all threats, especially from the north. So the legitimate base is there, for sure. But in practice, they were the rulers. So we see many samurai names, for example, like names that reflect the services to the emperor, And all the times, whenever a new shogun was would be throned, he would express his gratitude and to the emperor, and receive his permission to be his representative in the north. That's why they like the word shogun. He would receive his symbolic sword from the emperor, etc. But this is not the case in practice. So now, until the end of the Ashikaga shogunate in Kyoto, this is the situation. The Ashikagas, they were living in Kyoto in order to control from a close distance the palace. But this time, the Japanese art developed, and that's an interesting era. Maybe you have heard, if you are interested, about the Golden Pavilion, the Ginkakuji, and all Zen temples, famous Zen temples in Kyoto. Most of them, they are built in this era, Ashikaga period. This is the era, the period, artistic period is called the Higashiyama, the Northern Mountain period. But in a way, the Japanese art, as we know it, flourished, was established in this era. But it was going to finish, like all the other periods. At the end of the 15th century, there were hungers, riots, clashes, farmers were rioting, there were droughts, all kinds of different problems, and the emperor could not do anything about it. He's not accustomed, he was not, expected to do after that long period. But the Ashikaga shoguns themselves, they were also powerless. So there was chaos in the country. And this chaos would cause, let's say, civil war, which would last more than 100 years, which we call the Sengoku period, the warring states period. All the daimyos, the local rulers, the feudal rulers, were fighting with each other for 100 years. This is the era where samurai had the chance to show what they're made of. They had to fight. So the codes of Bushido, the codes of Bushi, the samurai way of living, and the way of thinking, everything flourished, was established, came into being and realizing in this period, until the three unifiers of the country appeared. These three unifiers, three generals, led by the first, I think he would take, most of the parts, because he was able to establish a strong center for a little while until he was killed himself. He's called General Oda Nobunaga. Oda Nobunaga. For the ones who would be interested, you can look into his life. Interesting man. He was able to, he was successful because of a new development, and that development came from south. What I mean by south is from the south of the whole Japanese archipelago, foreigners appeared. Portuguese suddenly in 1543, if I'm not mistaken. They appear on the shores of a little island down south. It is called Tanegashima. Tanegashima. And this word, the name of the island, would become synonymous with the word rifle for a long while in Japan. Rifle. Fire. Power. Fire. Power. During that heyday, hectic days of the Civil War, suddenly the Portuguese introduced a Portuguese ship, not intentionally, dragged by a storm, was carried to Tanegashima, and the sailors, they got off. They were saved by the islanders, and the islanders realized that the sailors had, something in their hand they were carrying, a long something, and they asked what it was, and they said, "This is a weapon." How that is a weapon they had never seen, and they demonstrated the power of the rifle, and they hit with a thunder their targets, and the local, let's say, locals, they understood, they realized the importance, the function that it could play in the Civil War in the mainland. They started reproducing the rifle, and the Portuguese said they didn't give the technology thoroughly. The Portuguese were bringing the the ingredients from China for that power. Gunpowder, yeah, I was looking for that word. The gunpowder was, it's critical. They didn't teach how to make gunpowder to the locals, but they taught them how to make the rifles themselves. So for a long while, Tanegashima masters were sending rifles to the mainland. But Oda Nobunaga, General Oda Nobunaga, was clever enough to realize its importance. And by having good relations with the Portuguese missionaries, because Christianity had, after the Portuguese coming to Tanegashima, they didn't stop there. They brought some missionaries, and Christianity spread in Japan. It is almost a forgotten history for many, but many of the daimyos, local landlords, had converted into Christianity. Many of them. There were maybe thousands and tens of, hundreds of thousands of people, Japanese people who were Christianized during the Warring States period, until it would be banned in the 17th century. So there were many missionaries and tradesmen, Portuguese, in Japan. Nobunaga was clever enough to talk with them, learn from them, and he was the first to use a, let's say, fire by turn system in his battles. What I mean by that, there were three lines of riflemen. The first line would shoot, and then would go back and start, preparing his next shoot, and the next line, so it would start revolve. And it was a firepower difficult to stand in front of. That's why, with the wise usage of firepower, Nobunaga started beating his rivals. Many of them subjugated. Many of them were killed and vanished in Japanese history. The era itself, the Warring States period in Japanese history, the Sengoku period, is also called the period where what we call it the feet becoming the heads, if I may call it like that. I mean, people from oblivion, people with no noble or samurai descent, they could rise up the ladders of success and become daimyos, landlords, feudal lords themselves, and they could secure a place for themselves. Everybody was fighting with everybody. So his success brought his end. Oda Nobunaga was killed by one of his closest associates, one of his own generals, in Kyoto, where he was staying and waiting for the final announcement of victory of his armies. Suddenly, his own army attacked him. He obviously didn't expect anything. He was caught unguarded, and he was forced to do seppuku that night. So he was out of the equation. The second unifier of the country is called Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Toyotomi Hideyoshi. He was the next closest, let's say, general of Nobunaga, and he was leading his armies for the final fight against some other clans. Suddenly he heard the assassination, the conspiracy, and he went back to the capital, and he killed the other general. And instead of leaving the power to his to anybody else, he grasps for himself. So interestingly, Toyotomi Hideyoshi is the one who benefited most from the killing of Oda Nobunaga. I mean, this is a subject, disputable subject. Many people have many theories about why and how Nobunaga was killed, but I believe Toyotomi Hideyoshi might somehow be involved in this killing. Anyhow, he benefited. He was a simple samurai who came from a modest background, and he couldn't show any noble descent to the palace, so he could not receive the title of shogun. And, well, but he was still the de facto ruler of the country. But after a while, before he died, he wanted his son to come after him, a small child. So he said to the third unifier of the country, Tokugawa Ieyasu. He was also an affiliate of Nobunaga. He wanted his friend Tokugawa Ieyasu and some other generals to accept the legitimacy of his son after his death. And they said, okay, we will continue your legacy and your son will be enthroned as the next shogun. Don't worry. But when Hideyoshi died, Tokugawa Ieyasu grasps the shogunate and establishes the Tokugawa shogunate, and he in Edo, today's Tokyo. For the next 250 years, Japan is Pax Tokugawa, so it's a peace. It is the let's say, it is not the rise anymore. It is the domination of the warrior class, the samurai class. Everything is organized in accordance with their proximity to the samurai class. The society was divided into four main groups. The first one, the highest, was the samurai class. The second one was the farmers. The third one was craftsmen, and the fourth one was tradesmen. The hierarchy was organized, was designed with their relations with the samurai class. I mean, generally, nobody talks about the other classes. I mean, I include them in my own books. One of them is the priestly class. The other one is the outcasts. So these were also the castes that were complementing the society. But as you see, samurai is on top. Well, the problem with the samurai class is that during the next 250 years, there is no war, real war. So what is a warrior when there is no war? That was the critical question. They were asking themselves. I mean, we are carrying two swords on our bellies. One of them is long, the other is short. Okay, we are practicing sword fencing. We are doing judo, using bows and arrows, and we are studying Bushido, the way of the samurai, etc., how to become a warrior, but there is no war. So gradually, the samurai class was evolving into becoming bureaucrats. This era is the bureaucratization of the samurai class. There are some voices, high-pitched voices, some writings, some philosophers saying, no, the samurai class should keep continuing to be warriors. Do not become bureaucrats. It's wrong. But this is the natural outcome of things. There is no war, there is no warrior. So the word samurai becomes gradually nominal, but the code itself stays there. The next week, we will talk about the Book of Five Rings, which was written by the most famous samurai in Japanese history. Is called the Miyamoto Musashi. And he wrote his Book of Five Rings in 1643. So you can imagine that in the 17th century, the mid-17th century, the generation who had experienced real fight on the battlefield during the Sengoku period were gradually fading away, and a new generation was coming who was unfamiliar with the battle practice and etc., and who were more ready to be bureaucratized. So during that period, we see the Book of Five Rings and another book of codes of samurai. It is called Hagakure, and it was written by another famous samurai, Yamamoto Tsunetomo. But the difference between the two is that Hagakure is based on the Confucian ethics and how a samurai would, smoothly become a bureaucrat. How to obey his superior, how to deal with his inferiors, how to behave in a society, how to behave in a ritual, etc. That's what he's emphasizing more. But Yamamoto Musashi is talking more about the thing itself. So this is the transition that the samurai class would live in the next 2.5 centuries until the Meiji Restoration would start. I mean, we don't go into Meiji Restoration because and the Meiji Restoration would, let's say, prohibit usage of the carrying of two swords for the samurai. All the castes would be banished, would be prohibited, and a new modern society would rise up. So it's a totally different subject. Conscription army in a modern sense would start in the late 19th century. Japan was going to evolve into a new modern state. But until then, we have seen that it started with the Ritsuryo, let me write this, maybe you would like to look at it. Ritsuryo systems that were important from mainland China, from the China, and those laws changed together with Buddhism. Don't forget, Buddhism, like all the other institutional religions, has the power to organize, and it was instrumental in establishing a central state in Japan. That laid the let's say firm basis for the Japanese. And from the start, there were two main topics. Maybe it is true for all the communities in history. Religious, what we do with the religion, what we do with the military. They sometimes have, they work together sometimes, and sometimes they clash with each other. And even Buddhism, now this is surprising. It was surprising for me when I first heard it. Even Buddhism was persecuted in Japan during the early Meiji period. Did you know that? I mean, if yes, wonderful. But if not, please go into the depths of it. It's an interesting subject. There are few books. The topic needs more research, scholarly research in that sense. But Buddhism was persecuted in Japan by the early Meiji leaders because it was accepted, it was assumed to be a foreign creed. What was national? It was Shintoism. So we see a reinvention of Shintoist beliefs in Japan. The Shintoist temples that you can see in Japan now with their torii, the gate-like, red structures in front of them, they are the creations of the early Meiji era. Before that, for more than thousands of years, 1,000 years. As I said, Buddhism devours the local gods. Buddhism had, in a way, devoured and digested Shintoism. What I mean by that is that, let's say, the Buddhism declared Shinbutsu Shugo, the unity of Buddhas and gods. For most of the Japanese history, Buddhism, showed itself, not showed, it functioned like that, that's for one thing, as the protector of Shintoism. So many Shintoist deities were revered in small altars within the Buddhist temples. So most Buddhist Shintoist gods did not have a real big, large, standard or in any size temples. Very few. But suddenly during the early Meiji period, when Buddhism was persecuted, many new temples were built or reverted from Buddhist temples. So invention of tradition was something in that era. How did they do it? Because before the Westerners appeared in the modern times, the American black ships appeared in the Edo Bay, the mid-19th century. Japanese intellectuals, most of them samurais, were working on Japanese history. The first historiographical studies were done in a province called Mito, and it's called the Mitogaku, National Studies. So already during the 18th and early 19th centuries, we see attempts to write Japanese history. I think this is important because it laid the basis for the Shintoist revival. Because Shintoism, as Kitabateki Chikavtsuka was proposing, the emperor should be, must be, has to be, has the right to be our leader, their leader. lead the country with all its powers. Tabata Kafsa influenced another thinker during the Tokugawa period. He is called Yamaga Soko, and I think this is another important philosopher who is undermined in Japanese studies, Yamaga Soko. And there are few Japanese nationals who remember his name, but he is important. Well, I cannot go into the details. It's another totally another subject, but let me tell you shortly that he is the mastermind behind the 47 Ronin incident. His theory, his books, his writings, you know, his writings prioritize the position of the emperor against the shogun. That's why he was banished from Edo, the capital, the shogunate. And he went to the place where the 47 Ronin in Akko were living, and he opened a dojo there, and he taught his views there about the superiority of the emperor. His teachings reached another important person who was the mastermind behind the major revolution. His name is Yoshida. I can tell you this with confidence because Yoshida Shoin was living in Yamaguchi, which for 1 year when I went to Japan as a university student, I stayed very close to the city that he had lived. I lived in Shimonoseki for 1 year. Anyway, Yamaguchi, he was from Yamaguchi. And he was in his dojo, in his academy, he was teaching Bushido, art of war. But in Bushido too, there are some écoles, there are some styles, ways. And the way he was teaching was, you can imagine, it was Yamaga-ryu, école of Yamaga-soko. So prioritize the emperor. The disciples of Yoshida Shoin were the earliest activists in the Meiji revival and uprisings against Tokugawa shogunate. The young Shishi, the lions, the activists, militants of Yamaguchi and Yamaguchi province, and Satsuma. They come together, they collaborate against the shogunate, and they finally destroy it. They didn't stop Yamaguchi and Satsuma, and generally they are called the Satjo Alliance. Maybe you would like to look more into it. They come together and they don't stop until they destroy the shogunate thoroughly. Why? You may wonder why. If you look into it more, you may wonder why they were so hateful against the shogunate. The answer is in memory, because they were on the losing side in 1600. This is something that you should know also when you think about the history of the samurai. In 1600, Eastern Japan, Western Japan, at the end of the Sengoku period, they confront each other. Eastern Japan was led by the Tokugawa forces, and the Western Japan was led by the Hideyoshi Hideyoshi's adherence, let's say. But finally, Tokugawa, of course, wins. But anyhow, Satsuma and Yamaguchi were on the losing side. And for the next 250 years, they had to endure the attitude, the cold attitude of the center against them. I mean, they were not abolished or something, but they kept that feeling of defeat. And when they found the opportunity, they attacked against the shogun. So that's admirable about their memory, the power of their memory. They didn't forget what happened 250 years ago. Okay, well, as a general introduction, my time is over, but anyhow, we talked, an overview. We talked about an overview, what happened. The centrifugal forces in Japanese history is important. The daimyo, the local rule is important. And that's why local culture also flourished in Japan. Local intellectuals flourished in Japan because there were, local rulers who were attracting smart people, scholars, warriors, etc. So Japanese history can be, if you look through the spectacles of samurai, is a colorful, vivid history of warriors and wars and clashes, and of course peace and tranquility, as Heian means. Okay, well, I would like to wrap it up at this point. Thank you for joining, and I hope you have new ideas. You have new questions in your mind that you can ask about Japanese history to yourselves. And if you have any questions you want to ask to me, I'm ready, so you can ask. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Erdal. I think, so whoever have questions, you can raise your hand or you can unmute yourself. Brock already has his hand up, so go ahead, Brock.
So thank you, Dr. Küçükyalçın, for this very informative presentation. My question is only indirectly related to samurai. You mentioned the use of corvée labor, right, in the Japanese history, for a long time. And I am wondering the actual uses of corvée labor. What was its sort of, role in infrastructural development throughout Japanese history? And although, at some point, corvée labor was kind of abolished, what was its sort of historical legacy, whether not like explicitly corvée, but, kind of similar, but probably more voluntary forms of collective labor mobilization informed Japanese development in the Meiji era and after?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Corvée labor was used. The duty was for 3 years, whether they had to work in the army if they were needed, and otherwise they would work in the public works like road construction. For example, in the 8th century to 9th century, you see large public construction works. The roads used even now, the routes were founded then. The 7 roads and the road from Edo to Kyoto and other roads, the Western Road, the Eastern Road, most of them were built that era. So they were working on the bridge construction, the road construction, and also palaces is an important part of the corvée labor, because Heian was, the new capital was flourishing, and workmanship was needed there. They would go there and work in the capital, etc. That was in that era, when it was, well, there were many, of course, complaints about against foreign labor. So after a while, the farmers, they started giving their land to the temples or the aristocrats, and instead of that, started working for the landholders themselves. So gradually we see the centrifugal forces working there. Instead of working for the central government, they started working for the local governments, and did not have to go and work in such places. When you ask about, well, you asked also about the modern part of it. Well, during the Meiji Revolution, the conscription system was introduced into Japan. Samurai class was abolished, and instead, all the, let's say, nationals were demanded to work, take part in the army. So that's the novelty that's brought by the Meiji government. We cannot talk about let's say, corvée labor during the Meiji modernization. But conscription as a method to the army was introduced and used, like many other modern nations do. So that changed actually, because the farmers, as the largest denomination, the largest part of the community, were now constituted the largest part of the army.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for asking that important question. Yep. Anything else?
Okay, so I think Erdal Sensei has his class coming up from 2, so or 3, so I don't want to hold him any longer. But for the rest of the participants, thank you for joining us and sticking with us. And you can continue to listen to his part 2 of this very interesting talk, and which will take place at the same time next week. So we look forward to listening the latter part of this story. And we hope the rest of the participants will be coming back too, if you like. So thank you again, Erdal Sensei, for this covering a very long period of history, but explaining it in a way that really makes sense, and highlighting some of the very interesting and unique part of Japanese history. So thank you again, and we look forward to listening to part 2 of your talk.
Thank you, Aiko Sensei. Thank you, Professor Gürel. So I hope to see you next week. Thank you all the participants too. I hope they enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.